Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to online session number 15 for the Blackall Range Maleny proposed local plan area. And welcome to Councillor Law, who's joining us online today as well. The Council is committed to undertaking thorough community engagement for this project, while also keeping our community and staff safe. That's our highest priority. Due to the current COVID-19 health risks, some of the scheduled online, so in-person events have been cancelled. Community input is important, and to ensure we receive as much feedback as possible, Council has scheduled these live online sessions, as well as utilising a range of other online tools to receive your input. At the same time, you can visit a physical display, a hard copy of all the documentation at our Council customer service desks, libraries or mobile library. Just in terms of today's session, a bit of housekeeping. Even though this is a 1 hour online session, it's all about getting information out to you. We're still encouraging you to provide your feedback via the website. You can also do that by phone or by email until the 31st of March 2022, and I'll take you through that website in the second half of the session. For the session itself, it's being broadcast via Microsoft Teams Live. Now this broadcast platform requires you to use the chat function. Your camera and your audio is switched off using this platform. So if you can just find the chat function, which is up in the top right-hand corner of your screen if you're using the PC, similar on a mobile device, tap that little speech bubble and it'll open up the chat function, and then you can put your questions through to myself. Feel free to put questions through as we're proceeding with the first half, but we'll get on to the questions in the second half of the session. In terms of that second half of the session, we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. There may be some questions we don't get to. They may be too detailed. What I would suggest is that you can get in contact with us following this session by phone or by email again, and we'll give you some assistance one-on-one. At the same time, we are also recording these presentations, so there will be 18 in total, and you'll be able to view all of them, including this presentation, on the event page that you went to access this session. I would suggest coming back to the event page in about 48 hours, so say on Friday, when we should have this specific presentation uploaded. Before we commence with today's session, I want to say on behalf of Council, I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the Sunshine Coast local government area, the Kabi peoples of the coastal plains and northern hinterland, and the Yinabara peoples of the southern hinterland. We wish to pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important role First Nations people continue to play within the Sunshine Coast community. So in terms of today's session, I want to welcome Jason. He's your presenter for the first half of the session. He's the coordinator of the plan scheme and projects. I'm your moderator, I'm Paul. I'll be collecting the questions in the background while Jason's presenting, and then we will engage a session in the second half discussing those questions, as well as giving you a run through of the website. So I'll pass over to Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everyone. So the purpose of today's session is to inform you about the new planning scheme project and the preliminary consultation that we're currently undertaking. It's also proposed to explain to you how this proposal relates to your local area, being the Blackall Range Maleny proposed local plan area, and importantly, providing some more information on how to get involved in this current consultation and have your say. So the new planning scheme project. So what is a planning scheme? In its simplest form, a planning scheme is a local planning scheme regulates development in a local council's area. So they are prepared by the local government, and essentially it sets out a vision and strategies to manage future growth within the local government area. It also sets out state, regional and local development assessment policies that are used to assess development when applications are brought forward. Planning schemes seek to balance competing interests, and as you could appreciate, in a region as diverse as the Sunshine Coast, that's very important that we seek to balance those various interests. It's also important to note that we do have a current planning scheme, being the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme 2014. A little bit more information about the new planning scheme project itself. Council resolved back in January 2021 to prepare a new planning scheme under the State Planning Act. This followed a review of the current planning scheme that was undertaken in 2020, which found that whilst the current planning scheme is operating quite effectively, it could be updated in a number of ways to better reflect more recent state, regional and local planning initiatives, as well as being updated to provide more recent information and data that has come to hand since the current planning scheme was prepared in before 2014. The new planning scheme project is a multi-year project with a number of steps, and I'll go through those steps in a little bit more detail shortly. We're intending for the project to be completed by 2024, so the new planning scheme taking effect by that time. Once again, multiple interests and stakeholders are involved in a new planning scheme project, and balancing those competing interests and stakeholder interests is quite an important task for us in that process. And once the new planning scheme is adopted, it will replace the current planning scheme. Just a little bit of information about the planning framework that we work within when preparing a new planning scheme. So planning schemes must be consistent with state and regional policy. We have a range of documents that we need to have regard to there, being the state planning legislation, the Planning Act 2016, the single state planning policy that sets out all the state interests that need to be considered in preparing a planning scheme. And also for the South East Queensland region, we have the South East Queensland Regional Plan 2017, also known as Shaping SEQ, which is the preeminent land use planning document for the South East Queensland region and the 18 local governments that comprise that region. At a more local level, we also need to consider and integrate various local strategies and policies that Council has prepared over the last several years. And these include such things as Council's corporate plan that has recently been updated, as well as some of the what we call Tier 1 strategy documents, such as the Environment Livability Strategy, the Regional Economic Development Strategy, and the Community Strategies. And each of those strategies are then supported by a number of other plans and strategies that sit under those. And some of those examples include the Coastal Hazard Adaptation Strategy, the Sunshine Coast Design Strategy, which is looking at the design principles for the Sunshine Coast. And there's a variety of other documents that we have regard to when preparing a new planning scheme and ensuring that those strategies are embedded into the new planning scheme in a land use planning context. This diagram shows the process for making a new planning scheme, and it sets out 8 key steps in that process. And as you can see, we are at the relatively early stages of the process, being at step 2, and that's being this undertaking the current preliminary public consultation. That is the first of 2 main public consultation steps in the process. The second major part of the public consultation will be at step 5, which will be formal public consultation on the proposed planning scheme document itself once it's prepared. And this also shows that at the end we are looking at getting to the end of the process by 2024, but also noting that along the way there's steps, or the timing of certain steps in this process are not within Council's control, such as state interest reviews and reviews by the Planning Minister that are part of the process. Just a little bit of information about the preliminary consultation that we're currently undertaking. Just the first point there, this consultation is not required under state planning legislation, so it's a non-mandatory step in the process of preparing a planning scheme. However, this council is committed to ensure that the community, plays a thorough role in the process for preparing the new planning scheme, and this preliminary consultation step is seen as an important part of that. The early consultation that we're undertaking does provide an opportunity for some early input into the planning scheme before we actually prepare a draft planning scheme document. So once again, that's an important thing to consider. The feedback that we're primarily seeking at the moment is being sought via surveys that are available on Council's Have Your Say website, and also a variety of other online tools. And the preliminary consultation that we're undertaking at the moment will finish on the 31st of March. In terms of what we actually are consulting the community about at the moment, we're proposing a vision for what the Sunshine Coast could look like in 2041. And that's a word picture, if you like, of what that the Sunshine Coast may look like by that 2041 time frame. And this overarching vision that we've released is replicated on this image on the slide here. In terms of implementing that vision and realising that vision, we've also released or put out for comment some proposed regional and local planning directions to help manage that growth and change to 2041. Importantly, those directions that we're proposing are seeking to reflect what we believe the community values and what they would like to see into the future. Once again, these proposed planning directions are seeking to balance the different needs and interests that are part of a planning scheme process. As part of the current consultation that we're undertaking, we're also seeking some feedback on some topical planning issues that we've been made aware of that have come up as recurring or emerging issues from a planning perspective that we're also seeking some feedback on, and probably later in the session we'll perhaps touch upon those in a bit more detail as well. In terms of the regional planning directions that are proposed to manage growth and change, these are set out under a number of different themes, and these themes are shown on this slide here. So we have shaping sustainable growth, what the future settlement pattern will be for the Sunshine Coast in 2041. A smart economy, how the economy will be supporting that growth and the opportunities that will provide. The healthy and resilient environment is also an important theme that's been identified, and that's part of what makes the Sunshine Coast such a special place. Another theme is strong and created community of communities, recognising that the Sunshine Coast is diverse in its communities, coastal communities, hinterland communities, and rural township communities. And also another theme is connected people and places, how we connect as a community, both physically in terms of transport connections, as well as digital connections and other considerations. In terms of the proposed regional planning directions, this map here is a proposed settlement pattern map and is part of a shaping sustainable growth theme that we're seeking feedback on at the moment. And this is what we typically call, as planners, we'd call this a strategic plan map, if you like, showing what the various broad land uses and how they're distributed across the Sunshine Coast region and what that may look like in 2041. So this shows them some important elements such as the activity centre network, all the various centres that support the population of the Sunshine Coast. Maroochydore is the principal activity centre for the Sunshine Coast, supported by a number of other important town centres across the region. It also shows the various residential or living environments, the coastal living areas, the hinterland living areas, the rural residential areas, as well as some of the new or emerging community areas such as Palmview, Caloundra South and BUR East. It also shows, this map also shows some of the important major conservation areas, the rural areas of the Sunshine Coast, as well as some of the important green space elements, such as the regional interurban break located between Greater Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast, the Lower Mooloolah floodplain green space area, and also the Blue Heart, which takes in the central part of the Maroochy River floodplain. This settlement pattern map also shows some of the important transport elements, the major road networks, as well as some of the proposed major public transport networks, including the CAMCOS heavy rail connection between Veerwar and Maroochydore, and also the mass transit corridor within the coastal area. So this is part of the material that's been released for consultation at the moment, and certainly we're seeking feedback on this proposed settlement map as well as a range of other regional planning directions for the new planning scheme. In addition to the regional planning directions for the Sunshine Coast, we also have released, as part of this consultation, some further information about some proposed local planning directions for the various communities across the Sunshine Coast. And we've identified that through some proposed local plan areas. And each of those have a proposed vision statement about what that local area is envisaged to look like in 2041, as well as some proposed planning directions to help manage that future growth and change and to realise that vision. The proposed local planning directions that we've identified for these local areas respond to a range of issues, such as what are the key constraints and opportunities that are located within these local plan areas? What are some of the community values and aspirations that we are aware of that helps to shape those proposed planning directions? And what are some of the localised issues and challenges that are emerging that we also need to respond to as part of those proposed local planning directions? We believe that there's a number of benefits of having a local planning approach in a planning scheme. It provides that protection of the local character, recognises what that local character is and seeks to protect that local character, recognising that we are a community of communities and that the planning scheme should not be a one-size-fits-all approach. The map on this slide shows the proposed 18 local plan areas that have been identified for the new planning scheme project. And these proposed local plan areas have been identified using various boundaries, such as suburb boundaries, locality boundaries, and also major features such as major roads and the like. And it also shows and highlights the location of the proposed Blackall Range Maleny local plan area with relative to the other proposed local plan areas across the Sunshine Coast. In the next segment, I'll just go through in a bit more detail the proposed further details on the proposed Blackall Range Maleny local plan area. Just in terms of the location of this area, it's located in the western part of the Sunshine Coast region, centred around the communities of interest of Maleny, Montville, Flaxton and Mapleton. It also takes in some other localities, including North Maleny, Balmoral Ridge, Doolong, Karulipa, Reesville, Witter, Bald Knob and parts of Wutha, Curramore, Hunchy and West Woombye. So quite a mixture of localities there. The rural scenic amenity views and village character of the towns and villages we know that's attractive to tourists, and that's recognised in the proposed local planning for this area. We also know that this area supports a range of small-scale, low-key, nature-based tourism function facilities and the like, as well as some important agribusiness and local food production elements as well. In terms of the role of the Blackall Range Maleny proposed local planning area in the broader region, we've identified a range of different roles. It has those regional landscape values. It's quite iconic in terms of those particular values. Rural production remains an important role for this particular local plan area, and that's intended to continue. Hinterland living and rural living options. We know this area does provide those role for the region, as well as some of the tourism focus, particularly around the nature and rural-based features of this local plan area. And the area also has an important role in terms of major habitat and biodiversity values. Just in terms of a draft vision statement for this proposed local plan area, each of the proposed local plan areas has a proposed vision statement, and this is just a summary snapshot of that vision. I would suggest hopping on the website if you can to look at the draft vision statement in more detail for this proposed local plan area and other local plan areas. So the draft vision statement for Blackall Range Maleny recognises that Maleny, it has its traditional main street character, it also has strong heritage character and a strong community feel, and it's intended that it will remain the largest town on the Blackall Range area. Montville will remain a key tourist node with a number of boutique shopping and retail experiences, day tripper type market, as well as a more broader tourism market. Mapleton will offer more local convenience shopping type functions, servicing the needs of the local community. The vision also recognises townships and villages will be characterised by some traditional low density, low rise residential development on relatively larger lots. The vision also recognises the rural residential communities of Flaxton, North and South Maleny, Geelong, Koroipa have experienced little change during that time. The vision also recognises that nature and rural-based tourism will remain a primary focus of this proposed local plan area. And the draft vision statement also recognises the important water resource, landscape and ecological values of the Lake Baroon area catchment and ensuring those values are protected on an ongoing basis. In terms of that draft vision statement, we then look at some proposed local planning directions to help support that vision for the Blackall Range Maleny proposed local plan area. And I'll just run through these on the next couple of slides. So no or minimal change is proposed in the maximum allowable building heights for this area, which at the moment is probably predominantly in that 2-storey range, or about 8.5 metres for most areas. There's also no or minimal change proposed to local growth management boundaries that sort of identifies and contains the urban and rural residential growth areas for this area. Also proposing to retain large urban and rural residential minimum lot sizes and continuing that into the new planning scheme. Also seeking to retain the iconic provisions, and these are the provisions that were brought in with the 2014 planning scheme when we were responding to some legislation that existed in Queensland at the time, in the iconic places legislation that identified a number of locations across the state that needed special planning attention in terms of protecting some of those iconic values. And certainly the proposal here is that we would continue to maintain those iconic provisions and also potentially investigating extending those into other areas of the escarpment, such as the Mountain View Road area. Maintaining controls on advertising signs, especially in the rural areas and along scenic routes and scenic drives, is also seen as an important planning direction. And finally on this slide, retaining compact centres, so maintaining a compact town centre arrangement and strong provisions to discourage out of centre development occurring beyond those defined centres. Other proposed planning directions for this local plan area include protecting the water quality in Lake Baroon and Mary River catchments, which is quite important, particularly Lake Baroon as a water supply catchment for both our region and the broader region. Maintaining current limits on subdivision in rural areas will remain an important principle. Tourism development maintains its local rural and residential amenity. So that tourism development certainly is encouraged, but it needs to be also appropriately located and serviced to support those tourism needs. Maintaining limits on vegetation clearing is also seen as an important proposed direction to preserve habitat and landscape values in the area. And also proposing to review provisions relating to the establishment of service stations within centres, and certainly are well aware of the considerations, particularly that have recently occurred in Maleny Township in relation to that issue. We also, as part of the proposed preliminary consultation, we've sought to indicate for each of the proposed local plan areas what level of change the community and residents may anticipate within these respective local plan areas. And certainly for this proposed local plan area, we've identified that there's probably relatively limited opportunities for further growth and change within this proposed local plan area. So in terms of compared to the existing planning scheme to the new planning scheme, we're anticipating a very low level of proposed change. And the second dial shows a low level of change from the current on-the-ground situation to what may be anticipated under the proposed planning scheme. And that acknowledges that there is probably some untapped potential in the current zonings and potential under the existing scheme. And if that potential is realised, then it may lead to a relatively low level of change based on the current on-the-ground situation. So what does all this mean? We are certainly keen to seek feedback at this stage and let us know what you think about these proposed planning directions, both at a region-wide and local planning scale. And you can have your say by scanning the QR code here or visiting the Have Your Say website that contains all the information and material that I've covered briefly here in much greater detail. So you'll be able to get on there and look at that information. Paul will go into a little bit more detail on that shortly as well. So what are we seeking feedback on? Do you agree with the proposed vision and proposed planning directions for your local area? Are the proposed boundaries of the local plan area about right? Is there anything else you want to see protected or enhanced in the planning scheme that hasn't been identified? And what types of development would you like to see encouraged or supported in your local area? So those sort of questions are what we're seeking the feedback on, and certainly through completing this online surveys and the other online tools that are available, we would certainly like to hear from you on those. So just in summary, Council is preparing a new planning scheme. We are in the very early stages of that process. And this preliminary consultation is the first of two main opportunities to have your say on this project. The next stage of that opportunity will be once we prepare a draft planning scheme that will be released for further public consultation, most likely sometime during 2023. This preliminary consultation is currently underway, and it does close on the 31st of March of this year. As mentioned, you can provide your feedback and fill out a survey, and that can be done by scanning the QR code here, going on the Council's Have Your Say website, or also we have hard copy surveys available at Council's service centres as well as the libraries and mobile libraries. And if you do have any questions, certainly we'd encourage you to get in touch with us, the project team, and we would seek to answer your questions to help you get through the information and material, and to how you if you're having troubles in terms of providing your feedback, then we can certainly assist in providing that assistance. So that finishes the presentation part of the session here. I'll now pass back to Paul to just help facilitate the question and answer session.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for that presentation. Okay, we've had quite a few questions come through, which was great. Just to clarify, so the session is primarily about getting information out to you to assist you getting to the website and or to the physical copies we've got at the libraries, etc. So you can understand the information, understand what's being proposed, to then hopefully complete a survey or to then have a further discussion with ourselves and any one of the planners here before the closing date on the 31st of March. Now for this section of the session, we have about 30 minutes. You continue to put your questions through. I'll do my best to keep track of those questions while we're talking and try to have that discussion with Jason. Now what I'll say very clearly is that the purpose of this presentation is about the preliminary consultation, so we cannot give you advice on site-specific matters. We cannot give you advice on any live development application at this point in time. That has happened in a few other sessions, just need to clarify that. This is a very 1 hour session, so if we don't get to all your questions, you can still contact us following the session, and I'll take you through that when we get to the website portion of this session. The QR code on the bottom of your screen, you can scan that and it'll take you straight to the website that we will look at. You'll also see that QR code on banners which we've erected around the region. So usually on a lamppost or on a bus stop, you'll see a poster with the same QR code. Just scan it, it'll take you straight to it. You can always Google, but I'll take you to the website anyway, and we can have a look at it. So just getting to some of the questions, and what we've generally done with this session is start at the top, try and interpret what the question is, and then try and have a discussion with Jason. So we'll start at the top anyway. So Jason, one of the first questions that came in was regarding how the planning scheme accounts for what provisions it puts into in terms of mitigating climate change. So do we consider climate change as part of this consultation process?
Yeah, certainly. A planning scheme is, in the scheme of things, is relatively limited in what it can do directly to influence some climate change outcomes. But certainly, where that's possible, we are seeking to include that into the planning scheme process. Having a compact settlement pattern is important to ensure that we're not having as much reliance on private motor vehicles. Is quite a broad example, as well as looking at more sustainable and appropriate design for climate considerations. That the planning scheme can also have some influence in that space as well to some degree. So and also I think there is actually a hot planning topic that has identified climate change as a topical issue, and I would encourage you to read that particular hot planning topic information sheet that goes in a bit more detail about what we're proposing to do in the new planning scheme in response to the climate change challenge.
And we'll take you to that hot topic as part of the walk through the website, so you can see that. The second question came in, and it's a pertinent question. We've had to move quite quickly to do an online as a result of COVID. The guest was questioning, well, why are we still doing that? There's obviously other events where people can go out face to face. But obviously we've got to follow certain requirements and directions in that respect.
That's correct. Certainly we typically would go out into the community in face-to-face situations. The advice that we had taken was that was not advised, particularly earlier in the year. I understand that there is some easing of restrictions that are occurring at 6 p.m. on Friday at the direction of the Premier and the Chief Health Officer. So certainly we're looking at some options for us in the latter part of the consultation period up until the 31st of March that we may get back out into the community and do some face-to-face engagement where that's appropriate. So I'd stay tuned on that front.
Yeah. Next question about overlay mapping and specifically in response to flooding, bushfires and other hazards. And I would say other hazards, probably something like landslip, for example. Does Council update its overlay mapping to protect the Council? Now, the guest has talked about the most recent events, so yes, they're probably quite fresh in people's minds at the minute in terms of flooding, but do we update our overlay mapping as part of the scheme?
But yes, we certainly do. Some of the overlay mapping is state-based mapping, and some of the overlay mapping is our own or council information and data that's been produced through various studies and investigations. And as through a new planning scheme process, it does provide the opportunity to provide updated information and data, and that generates new and better overlay mapping, which is getting better and better all the time in terms of its accuracy and coverage. So that's an ongoing dynamic process that we're always seeking to update that information where we can.
And it's definitely another good reason to redo it. Planning scheme every 10 years, etc. So it's, so it doesn't get outdated.
Correct. Yes. Very important.
Yeah. So the next question was regarding the draft regional directions and the fact that they refer to mass transit. This particular guest is concerned that, why are we still referring to mass transit in the regional perspective?
Well, certainly that is part of an overall integrated transport network for the Sunshine Coast. That includes, all the various road networks as well as some of the important public transport networks, so that how that all works as a whole. And certainly the mass transit corridor that's proposed, along with the CanCost corridor and some of those other proposed or planned corridors, are important as part of the overall solution for the integrated transport plan for the Sunshine Coast. So that it's seen as important to be referring to those important parts of the network and how the land use can help support that overall network, and they feed off each other.
Yeah. And it's still an ongoing process that hasn't been completely determined as yet.
No, that's right. That's an ongoing project for council, and that's currently with the state government for a consideration of more detailed consideration of those options.
So the second part to this question, the guest was a bit concerned as to whether or not council will listen through this process. I mean, this is a preliminary consultation. We talked about that. It's not. This isn't required by law, but we are taking that step, and there's reasons for that, wasn't there?
Yes, certainly. This preliminary consultation provides an opportunity for early input from the community to get that early feedback on these proposed planning directions for the new planning scheme. And subject to the feedback that we receive, we'll certainly be taking heed of that feedback and working out, how we may look at adjusting those proposed directions in response. And then once we've looked at that feedback, then we'll get on with the task of actually preparing a draft planning scheme, which will then be released for further public consultation as a draft planning scheme document once that's drafted.
Yeah, so there's still another round to come and more time to give us feedback. Another question was concerns that some of the strategic background documents may be out of date, and the guest has made reference to climate change, flooding, and bushfire, and specifically raised the ELS. I mean, the ELS is dated from 2017, but the part of this process we do undertake further studies, and and then something like the ELS has actions that take it forward. Is that?
That's correct. The ELS, the Environment Livability Strategy itself, is updated through its actions that are arising out of that ELS strategy. So that's updated in the background as well. And then we also, through the planning scheme process, have regard to the most recent and up-to-date information, which helps us to look at the land use planning component when we're looking at that through the draft planning scheme, and also embedding and reflecting that updated information in the overlay mapping and so forth, to ensure that it's using the most current information that we have available.
Yeah. There was another part to that question regarding water security. That's not solely a responsibility of council, is it, in terms of that?
No, that's correct. I mean, that's a bigger picture issue that certainly is for the region and the state as a whole, and other authorities such as SEQ Water and some of those larger authorities that look after those bigger picture water supply issues. With the water grid and other initiatives, those water security issues have been addressed over time and will continue to be addressed. But we don't have a direct role in those sort of decisions, but we certainly are part of the decision making and involved in that.
And so that's this sort of information. There's stakeholders that feed into this process, don't they, and get reflected in some way. So we do engage with them and many other stakeholders.
Correct. I mean, there is a state interest review process, and SEQ Water and other utility providers and authorities have the opportunity to have input into the planning scheme process as well, and we need to respond to that feedback and input as we go.
Yeah. The next question is really good. It jumps off the question we've just had around the ELS and the fact that the ELS has a number of actions built into it or on forward bits of work it takes forward. So the question is, what is the Blue Heart?
Yeah, the Blue Heart is a project that a council initiative, but also it's got a memorandum of understanding between other levels of government, so the state government through the Department of Environment and Science, and also Unity Water is another partner in that project, and that's looking at the central part of the Maroochy River floodplain, and known as the Blue Heart because it is the heart of that particular catchment, and looking at resilience to climate change and other blue carbon and other opportunities that may arise over time as that area experiences change from climate change, flood and coastal processes that are evolving over time, and how we can harness those opportunities moving forward and working with the landholders in that area to achieve those sorts of outcomes.
So pertinent with recent events and flooding. Next question was regarding one of the items in the local plan directions regarding, and I'll read it out too. So it's in the Blackall Range Maleny local planning draft vision. It refers to townships and villages are characterised by traditional low density, low rise residential development of larger lots. That's our vision for 2041. What does that mean? Does that mean that we envisage those townships not really changed and the current character would be maintained?
Yeah, not substantially changed. You know, there is a current zonings that are allocated under the current planning scheme, and preparing a new planning scheme provides the opportunity to review those zonings and revisit those zonings across the local area. But we don't anticipate there'd be high levels of change beyond the current planning scheme, and it is about protecting character and being aware of those character elements, ensuring that we are mindful of that as part of our planning.
Yeah, it'll certainly be very different from what you're probably seeing in the master plan communities, that more medium, more density, more dense development. You wouldn't expect that in.
No, small lots and those sorts of things are not anticipated to be the desired outcome in these types of locations.
Next question is something that we've got in a few of the sessions, and we've got to clarify where the planning scheme has a role or doesn't, and what it reflects. And this question talks about different open space community initiatives that may be undertaken by council or other parts of government, and in particular the reference to Sunshine Coast Ecological Park, and why is that not explicitly mentioned in the local planning directions? Is that something the planning scheme is delivering, or? Yeah,
the planning scheme is not delivering that project directly. If I understand this correctly, this is the area that council's looking at the moment around the Mary Cancross Reserve and the expansion to that reserve. There is I understand some planning underway there from an open space perspective. What we can do through the planning scheme, once we have some further details of what that planning reveals, we may be able to reflect some of that into the planning scheme in a land use planning sense, and that's something that, depending on the timing of that, we may be able to incorporate into this new planning scheme, or if not, that may be a future amendment to the new planning scheme to reflect the outcomes that are desired, and ensuring that the planning scheme helps to support that.
Yeah, and that's relevant when you think of the Lower Malula River Environmental Reserve and the interurban break. Those things are reflected because there's obviously great understanding. So we do reflect those open spaces and recreation initiatives as well. Question, which is a really good point to jump onto the website, regarding how can anyone access local planning area information. So what I'll do right now is just take you to that website, because this is an important part of this session to enable you to become aware of where the information is, and then be able to easily access it. So just give me a second just to share my screen with you again, and then we can bring you directly to that page. So now hopefully everyone can see this. So this is just the Sunshine Coast Council homepage. If you can't find it, just Google Sunshine Coast Council and it'll take you straight to it. When you come to the homepage, if you click on the top left-hand corner, it has a thing called Sites, and as you scroll down that drop-down, it brings you to a section called Have Your Say. Have Your Say is the name of our consultation portal website, where we upload all our projects and consultation information. And right at the top, you can see the new planning scheme project. So if you just click on that, bring you to the homepage for the project itself. So this is where you will start if you want to navigate through to any of the information or any of the homepages to the local plans themselves. So I'll take you through the most important parts of this website, and these three are, I would say, the most critical places to go to. So this first window tile will take you to the regional vision and regional planning directions, which Jason took you through in the presentation. The second will take you to the local plan areas. There's 18 proposed local planning areas. And then hot topics is what we've referred to, and we'll jump to that in a minute in terms of climate change. So there are top 10 hot planning topics that have emerged over the last number of years. On this page itself, we've tried to approach this consultation as broad as we can, given the community as many different ways to absorb the information as possible, because not everyone engages these days just by reading a PDF or a news article. They may want to see a video or some other visual information to communicate what this is, because this vision is talking through to 2041. So we've done a video, got more text. If you're comfortable just reading the information, you can jump straight onto these two PDFs. So part one is the entire regional vision, regional planning directions in one place, and then part two is all 18 local planning areas within one document. So if you'd rather just stick to the one document and read it through from start to finish, you can do that by going to these two documents, and then ultimately getting you to a point at which you can hopefully feel comfortable making a survey or giving us your feedback by the 31st of March this year. Now, in the interim, we recognize that there's a lot of information for people to work their way through and understand. They may have questions. What you can do if you have any questions is give us a call. We've got planners here during business hours every day until the end of March. You can also email us, or you can request a call back, and one of the planners will call you back and assist you. Really helpful part of this website is we've got FAQs scattered throughout it, and these FAQs are what we've try to foreshadow would be the big questions that may come out of the process. Like, why are we doing this? How can I provide feedback? Interestingly, what do we mean by some of this terminology? So we wanted to really help people understand what height means, whether it be low through to high rise, so that that would just guide them a bit. Instead of having to come to us and ask that question, you could just find it out quickly for yourself. Coming back up to the top. What's important in this process is to get to a survey, okay? So read the information and try and complete a survey, because this is where you will inform us best through this process, so we can take that information through to the draft into the scheme. So we've got surveys on the regional directions, the local planning directions, and then the hot topics. But we'll get to that in a second. So in terms of the regional information, the regional directions, there's a dedicated page. As you scroll down this page, you'll get to our interactive, a story map. So this is a way of trying to communicate the information visually, as well as some text. So reading the text and the information together will give you a sense of what it is that we're trying to communicate. This is a vision through to 2041. So just have a read through that. You can click through each of the different topics themselves as well. Or scroll through the entire document and get a sense of what it is we're trying to communicate in terms of those directions. So when you get down to the bottom of this page, again, we've tried to just give you the two key documents easily accessible in one place, so you can just jump straight into them rather than if you don't want to necessarily go through the entire website. Again, different people absorb information differently. And ultimately take the survey. So that's survey one, the regional planning direction survey. So I encourage you to do that before the end of March. Again, if you get stuck, give us a call, request to call you back. But what we've also taken a step to do is provide an opportunity for people to ask questions. So you'll see this is quite a common thing on websites. We've got a Q&A. So these are just broad questions that people have posed to us since we've started the consultation, and we've got planners who will take your question and then give you a response. So you might find that some of the questions that you have, either applicable to your local area or more broadly to the region, may already be answered in this section. So have a read through that as well, and pose your question if you have a burning question which hasn't already been answered. So coming back up to the top, we will jump over to the local planning directions. And this will assist with the guest who asked that question, or how can I access the local information? So that is by going to this second tile. And when we click on that, it should bring us up to the home page for all the 18, what we call a community of communities. So the local planning directions is very much recognized, and one size doesn't fit all. We've got all these distinct localities, communities across the coast, and we've tried to come up with 18 of them. So creating these new boundaries to represent what those 18 communities could be. If you just hover over this map, it'll indicate which local plan area you're looking at. So there's the Blackall Range, Maleny. When you click on this interactive map, it'll take you to that specific local plan area documentation. Now, we recognize that some people may be a little bit unsure about where they live within that area. Am I definitely in that local plan area? Or look, do I not agree or agree with the boundaries? Well, if that's the case and you're unsure, come up to this second part of this interactive map, and you can put your address in, and it'll take you directly to that location, so you can very quickly tell which local plan area you're in. But also, if you're a little bit concerned about the boundaries and think, well, actually it should be in a different location or different alignment, we'll add a marker and tell us why. So that's as important as doing the survey. So keen to hear what you think. In terms of local plan directions, so we'll jump back onto this map, the interactive map. There are other aspects down here, the common directions across all of them, but also the legend, which you can click to go to your local plan area. But just using the map, because it's really the quickest and easiest way to do it. It'll take us through to the Blackall Range Maleny local plan area page. So this is everything in terms of relevant to this session, and relevant to you as a community member of that area. And again, different ways for you to consume the information. You may want to just have a look at some imagery and text to understand what it is that we're trying to communicate. Again, you may want to just read the PDF. Now, everything we're talking about right now, have shown you in the presentation, is in this document. So you can have a look at the description, understand the draft vision. Here's the role of the local plan area in the region. You would see that from the presentation. And then as we scroll down, all the planning directions. So these are all the planning directions that are being proposed for the Blackall Range Maleny area, and which were covered in the presentation, and as well as our barometers to give an indication of the level of change that's expected as a consequence of the vision through to 2041. You see that low, very low expectation. And then critically, what we ultimately want you to do is tell us what you think. This is about listening to you. This is step 2 in an 8-step process. It is preliminary. We want to hear if you agree with the proposed vision and plan directions. Do you think the proposed boundaries are right? Do you have any suggestions about changing them? Is there anything in your local area that you particularly value and want to see protected or enhanced in this scheme? We may not have picked up everything that the community thinks is important, so let us know. And what types of development would you like to see encouraged or supported in your local area as well? So really keen to hear those. That's part of this process. And then critically, here's the map which shows the boundaries to the Blackall Range Maleny proposed local plan area. So have a look at that and tell us if you agree or if you have any other suggestions in terms of those boundaries. So let's go back out to the local plan page itself. And ultimately, what we want you to do is read the information and then complete the survey. So step 2 of 3 that we really want you to do, and this is for the Blackall Range Maleny local plan area itself, and do that by the end of March. Again, if you get stuck or have any questions, by all means, give us a call, email, or ask us to call you back, and we can do that. So coming back up to the top, and we'll go through to the hub planning topics, the third of the 3 elements that we really want your feedback on. So the hub planning topics themselves, as I said, these are the top 10 items, topics, themes that have come up over the last number of years through the operation of the scheme, or we've received feedback on that we think apply to the entire region, could apply to your local plan area in some way, but generally apply to the entire region. So worth having a look at each of these. You know, they cover affordable living, housing affordability, car parking, carports, climate change, the design of multiple dwellings, so your townhouses, dual occupancy, secondary dwellings, service stations, short-term accommodation, supply and use of industrial land, and uses in rural areas. So obviously very applicable to this local plan area. But we touched on climate change earlier. So if I just show you, just click on that tile, and it'll take you through to the documents. We've created documents to try and explain what it is that this theme of this topic is, and then what are we currently trying to do in terms of the plan scheme and other strategies. So really easy to read documents, not too long, but also covers the issues that have been identified, but then also tries to consider, well, what can we do in response to this theme? What are we proposing to do? So I encourage you to have a read of this and then give us your feedback. And the way to give your feedback is to, again, answer a survey. And this survey is just built straight into the website, so a lot easier to just jump straight onto and click and give us your feedback. And again, do this by the 31st of March. If you get stuck, you have a question, give us a call. Really simple. Like I said, we've got people on the phones, planners on the phone every day, answering emails, etc. Also the information session. So just hopefully you've got to the session today via this link, via the calendar. Not only have we got the remaining sessions up here, we've also uploading all the sessions we've done to date. I think there's a question from a guest regarding where the information will be following the session. We will and have uploaded sessions to YouTube, so you can click on that and watch it at any time, and then obviously hopefully move forward to doing a survey. So let me just quickly jump back to questions, because we have quite a few questions come through, which is really great. Let's just see. So someone asked about will feedback be considered after the closing date of the 31st?
Yeah, look, when we put out these consultations, we need to have a closing date to say this is the closing date for the consultation. However, you know, we'll be open to receiving feedback that may be received after that period within reason. So yeah, whilst that is the closing date that we finish the consultation, we'd certainly accept feedback that comes in shortly after that period.
Just trying to get through some of the questions. So there's a question here about wildlife corridors or enhancing wildlife habitat. Are we at the stage yet where that's reflected in the proposed local planning directions, or is that going to be at the next stage of drafting?
Yeah, look, we're certainly native vegetation areas, ecological areas, corridors, etc. are elements that we certainly do seek to reflect in the planning scheme. And then it's a question of, you know, when development is proposed on a site or a nearby area that is has those values, then, you know, that needs to be considered and assessed at a site-specific level. But, you know, certainly a planning scheme will reflect those elements, and in the next iteration, being the draft planning scheme itself, that will be released for consultation. That information and mapping will be part of the information that we'll be seeking feedback on in due course.
Good question about housing diversity, and the plan reflects little or no change to residential development on the Blackall Range as a consideration for more housing. Are we considering that housing affordability, housing diversity?
Yeah, look, this is a very topical and an issue that's not confined just to our council area, but is quite broadly affecting a lot of communities. And certainly through the planning scheme, there is the ability for us to ensure that we make appropriate allowances for housing diversity to occur within the various communities. But a planning scheme does not make that development happen. You know, development needs to that needs to be done by development proponents, and housing providers need to actually deliver those products. But the planning scheme can certainly play a role. We're very mindful of looking at ways and means that the new planning scheme can help to further support housing diversity, whether that's secondary dwellings, or the old granny flat type scenarios. We've had a lot of discussions around the tiny houses and what role they may play, as well as some dual occupancy type development. I know for a fact that in Maleny, for example, there is some allowance in Maleny around the town centre for some sort of low to medium density type development opportunities to occur, and I dare say that some of those opportunities probably haven't been taken up to date for a range of reasons, but there is certainly the capability for that to occur.
There's another really important, we're starting to run out of time. There's an important question about Aboriginal culture and protection of those heritage items. Is that reflected in the scheme? And
yes, it's certainly a focus of this new planning scheme is to give further consideration to Aboriginal cultural heritage matters. Whilst that operates under a separate act, being the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act, the planning scheme could certainly have a role and an important role to play to consider those values, and the new planning scheme provides an opportunity to better reflect those interests in the planning scheme.
Yeah. Like, we're starting to run out of time. There has been a few questions about this session and why we've taken you to the website and consumed some of the question and answer session on that basis. This session is primarily about getting information out to you and trying to assist you to get to the website to then read the information. We are here through the entire consultation process through to 31st of March to answer questions. So by email, on the phone, there's always someone there to give you that more one-on-one assistance. I know there's been a few questions we haven't been able to get to, so do please give us a call. And then these presentations are uploaded to the website, so anyone to YouTube, so anyone who's missed it or couldn't attend today can still watch it back at their leisure. And look, thank you. There's been a few people that have supported this approach and acknowledged that it's a good way to engage. So thank you very much. Look, we'll have to call it to a wrap, but do, like I say, get on the website or give us a call and we can assist. And thank you very much for your attendance today, and thank you to Consular Law for joining in as well. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.